Last year we made a series of 6 podcast episodes explaining the ins and outs of applying for a degree in architecture.
In this video, we're going to summarise all the steps in the process and ask 2 important questions to guide you through your application.
This is Talking Volumes. I'm Ewan Russell.
And I'm Ruben J. Brown, and we're both students of architecture at the University of Cambridge. That was good.
Yeah.
Do you like my black turtleneck I roasted? I thought we'd go with the... go with the
I'm also wearing all black.
Okay.
Image. So depending on the specific course, applying to an architecture degree is around 4 or 5 distinct steps.
For our Cambridge applications, they first asked for a personal statement.
Then we had to complete a 30-minute drawing task and a 30-minute essay on a fairly general question about architecture.
After that, we took our artistic portfolios to interview.
And then to a second interview. So why so many steps? I think most degrees only really need a personal statement or at most a statement in an interview.
I think the first thing to appreciate with architecture applications is that it's a very broad subject. It involves communicating with language and visual media, understanding complex scenarios, and solving tricky problems.
And there's just so many avenues you could go down and become really obsessed by. And in the first year of our degrees, I think that's something we've both come to see.
Yeah, I mean, you've become fascinated by construction processes and the physical ways that buildings get built, which I don't think either of us would have necessarily expected 18 months ago.
Yeah, and I think you're way more passionate about architectural history than you might have expected to be.
For sure, there's so many other parts too, from material sciences and new technology to the politics and policy of public space.
Since we first made the original Applying series, I think we've both learned that architecture can be such an exciting lens to understand the complicated world we live in.
Yeah, the buildings we make and inhabit can reflect so much about what our priorities are as a society or what they were at a particular time and how we relate to each other.
And maybe that's getting a bit abstract, but I think the point is to say that there's so much to be excited about. And if you're applying to a degree in architecture, at least some of these things are going to be motivating you.
Yeah, and that's really important. Choosing a degree in a university is one of those big life decisions. And in architecture, or anything else for that matter, it's important to know why you're excited about it. Why do you want to do this?
People are going to ask you that question too, like, so why architecture?
Yeah, it's the kind of question you could get asked at an interview. 2 years ago, Ewan, when you were applying, what was your answer to that?
I think I felt like architecture was a really useful way of sort of understanding people. Mm-hmm. And I was enjoying thinking through drawing and making art, and I felt like architecture could really ground this in solving problems in the real world. It also seemed to be a kind of very interdisciplinary practice, kind of bringing together so many different subjects and ways of understanding the world. What about you?
I think my answer's pretty similar. Partly I just really enjoyed doing it. That week we met on the summer school at the Bartlett, I just had a really good time. But beyond that, I've always liked thinking in lots of different ways at once, so the breadth that architecture covered was exciting, and I wanted to do something where, as well as just analysing problems, I could design solutions as well.
Whatever the answer to that question is for you, keep it in mind as you go through the process.
Ask yourself, why do I want to do architecture?
Woof. Transition. So now your sights are set, let's talk about the process. What skills do you actually need to start an architecture degree? What sort of things do you need to show off in your application?
So much of architecture is really about communicating.
Yeah, big time.
And that's communicating both ways. It's receiving communication and giving communication.
Yeah, first you have to listen and observe to a site, a history, a culture, the group of people you're designing with and for.
And then it's a kind of speaking and making, communicating your ideas and designs back to that site and that group of people.
And this communication is a constant back and forth. You're always translating between the physical world and drawings and other people and other people's ideas into models and so on.
And what that means is that you're translating between all these different mediums all the time.
And who you are as an architect is impacted by the way that you choose to communicate and translate.
It's kind of strange how design experience itself isn't really required to begin a degree that you'd think is all about designing.
Yeah, but when you actually do architecture, I think you see pretty quickly that you can't design without understanding the situation. And there's no point really designing a solution if you can't communicate it to the people who need the solution or who are going to help build it.
Yeah. In a way, design itself is quite easy to teach if you can communicate well with the people around you. So what does that mean for your university application?
Well, architecture applications in the UK, and I think this is true in lots of other parts of the world too, will test how you communicate in quite a few different ways.
So let's talk about the first hurdle, which for most courses will be writing the personal statement?
The personal statement is asking you to communicate the answer to the question we began this video with: why architecture?
Admissions tutors want to hear why you're passionate about the built environment, what excites you. The key is in the name, it's a personal statement.
And we've got a whole 25-minute podcast episode that digs deep into the process of actually planning, writing, and editing a strong statement, and gives examples of our pieces from a couple of years ago.
You can go give that a listen or read through the guide on our website, talkingvolumes.co.uk, after this video.
So the personal statement is a kind of speaking communication in that you're telling someone else about yourself and why you're excited about architecture. Then the next thing that a lot of universities ask for is more of a kind of listening and observing exercise.
Yeah, so this is the drawing task that many courses ask for applicants to complete. And it might seem a little odd for us to consider drawing a listening activity because a drawing is something that you make, right?
And yeah, often drawing is a form of speaking, especially later in your degree when you get to making design drawings. But with these drawing tasks, though each university is kind of slightly different, you're generally being asked to kind of translate a piece of the real world into a visual medium, a drawing. And that means really closely observing and kind of being aware of what's in front of you and translating that onto paper.
The Cambridge task is especially like this. You get given half an hour, some paper and a pencil, and can draw whatever you want from what you see in front of you. And honestly, I'm still terrible at this.
Yeah, I think you need some practice, maybe.
I guess we should for the video. I can't say it'll go well.
Yeah. I feel like you need more confidence in it, mate. It won't go well if you tell yourself it won't.
Let's do 10 minutes, not a half hour, and we'll set up a timer now.
I actually find this quite daunting.
It is.
These plates are hard as well. I haven't been drawing many sort of perspective drawings. I almost went to draw this table in plan, but then I was like, that's not a great example for the episode. I'm doing the risky move. I'm drawing like my own hand into it, which can really, because that can actually honestly look schneidi. Yeah. It's mad.
Oh, there's the timer.
Whoa.
Okay, that's it.
Okay.
Alright,
So
time's up. Let's get both of them in the middle.
I quite like it. I'm quite.
Of course you do. Of course you do. Much too kind. That's how it goes.
This is nicely composed, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alright.
Yeah.
That's a good compliment.
Yeah.
I'll take that.
It's kind of a photographer's drawing.
I think all my drawings are really photographer's drawings.
Again, we have a whole episode on drawing tasks if you want to dive a bit deeper, where we go over some of the different styles of task as well as Cambridge's essay task.
The Bartlett task can be especially weird, but we give a few helpful guidelines to keep in mind to make your drawings clear and accurate and deal with any kind of weird questions they might ask.
Okay, what's next?
Let's talk portfolio.
Yeah, so if the drawing tasks are a kind of visual communication about listening or observing the world around you, the portfolio is much more of a kind of speaking form of visual communication.
The portfolio is kind of the pièce de résistance of the application.
It's probably the thing we spent the most time on when we applied, both in the kind of making of the actual work that went in and also in the collecting and curating of all that work.
And it's a really great moment to show off how you make what you're interested in, who you are, without the constraints of a formal piece of writing like a personal statement.
It's nice to start thinking about it and working on it a little while before any of the interviews you might take it to, mainly just to space out the workload and think it through a couple times.
Again, we've got a whole episode that goes deep into the portfolio with typical formats and tips on how to present them. But for this video, let's just run through the most important things to keep in mind.
First, it's important to know that the universities like to see you working in a variety of media, both sort of physical and digital or 2D and 3D.
Again, this is about communication and translation. They want to see you communicate in lots of different ways. You had some animation in your portfolio, which you just showed on your phone. I had lots of these little zines of photography I'd made.
Yeah, and with lots of different types of work, it's worth thinking about the best format to present it in. Having a good photograph of any sculpture, I think, is nearly as important as the sculpture itself.
Yeah, and if you're like a painter and all your time spent making things is on painting, maybe you don't have such a diversity of different media, then think about how to show off all the different ways that you use paint and how a painting gets made. Show off your studies, demonstrate how you think about a 3D space to make a 2D composition, show off your sketchbooks.
Yeah, I think that goes for everyone. If you've got a sketchbook you take around with you to draw in and make notes of spaces in, admissions tutors really love to see that, and it's a really good habit to have in general.
Yeah, it might be easy to think that all the work in your portfolio needs to be super polished, but it's not really about that. They want to see your process, the way that you think and make and communicate. Quick sketches are going to be just as important as massive sculptures that took weeks to make.
Yeah, and on top of that, I think it's worth saying that universities aren't really looking for architectural design drawings. So I mean, just like plans, sections, elevations. And the reason for that is the first few months of studio work in architecture school are all about learning to design and make those kind of architectural drawings.
Yeah, you're going to learn those skills during your degree, and it really isn't required at all beforehand. If you've got architectural design work, it's worth considering what it would add to your portfolio.
Yeah, we both included work from the Bartlett summer school we did because it was really playful, and we made some kind of very interesting sketchy models, and none of it was too technical. But in my interviews, at least, we didn't really talk about it at all, actually.
Yeah, me neither, really. It was kind of glossed over.
Yeah.
I also had some drawings and renders from some work experience I'd done in year 10, but I didn't include those because I don't think they said a whole lot about how I think. And my other work that wasn't about architecture was just more interesting.
Yeah, and this is a really important thing overall. You don't have much time to present a portfolio, like maybe only 15 minutes. So making decisions about what to include and what not to, what should go first and what later, are kind of quite important to help you present more smoothly and make the work stand out best.
Yeah, and this is another reason to start fairly early. You want enough time to really practice presenting your portfolio and being comfortable with it. Preferably you're going to be able to show it to someone else, like a teacher or a friend or someone in your family, before you take it to an interview. And let that person ask questions as you go, just so you kind of get in the practice of showing off your work in that way.
You might find that you run out of time to present all the work, and each interview does sort of take its own pace. Like some interviews will go faster than others. So we really recommend putting your best work at the start.
Yeah, and I warn against trying to set up some spectacular finishing piece with a like super impressive drawing or sculpture you spent ages on, because you might just run out of time to show it, which would really suck.
Yeah, I think making a good first impression is
going to help.
Gonna help, yeah.
The podcast episode we did on portfolios really goes into these questions of sequencing, about how to order your work to make your portfolio and the way that you present it run super smoothly.
Okay, final thing, the interviews themselves.
Long days.
Yeah, intense days.
Lots of waiting around to be done.
And it can feel really daunting, but hopefully it's also quite exciting.
Yeah, and balancing the nerves and keeping calm is probably what matters the most. I really hope for everyone that you get to do these in person, because it's a cool experience. But if you are doing that, get outside, go for a walk, and talk with the other people there, because they might end up being your classmates. There's people in our year that we met at interviews at the Bartlett and Cambridge and stuff.
And in the interview itself, though, it's about communication again, both sort of speaking and definitely listening as well.
Yeah, listening is super important. For me, especially when the nerves are high, if I really pay attention to understanding the question I'm asked, it makes answering feel a lot less intense and more clear and be more accurate with that.
Yeah, and feel free to leave some silence after a question just to sort of listen. And then as you begin thinking about your answer, talk through your thinking out loud.
I'm just leaving a long silence. Thinking aloud is like the buzzword of good university interviews, but it's true, and it's just like the portfolio. Interviewers aren't expecting polished answers that you've practiced and prepared. They'd much rather hear you explain your way through your thinking in real time.
Yeah, and almost no one has studied architecture before when coming to university. And interviewers don't really expect you to know that much about the subject at all. I think it's really unlikely that you'll be asked anything super challenging or tricky in an interview. Mm-hmm. And again, it's more about them getting a sense of how you communicate and think.
Hopefully your interviews will feel like having a chat, just a lot more about buildings than most conversations you probably have. Again, you can listen to our podcast episode on this, where we go into our experiences from interviews and give some advice.
Alright, so that's a brief rundown and introduction to some of the different stages of an application.
It is quite a lot, isn't it?
Yeah, it is indeed a lot.
I think when you start to break it down like we've begun to do in this video, it stops being so intimidating.
Yeah, I think when you look at all the different parts of an application, it can feel quite intense, but each individual bit by itself maybe isn't so important because of that. And if you think you've messed up your drawing task, or you didn't have enough time to do a final edit on your personal statement, say, in the grand scheme of things, it might not be such a big deal.
Yeah, all the parts of this application are taken as a whole. And because the subject is so broad, the way that universities want to see your excitement for it is also really broad. So, that's drawing and writing and conversation and your artwork. It's the grand sum of all of those things taken together that counts in the end.
Yeah, and admission tutors, by and large, want you to do well.
Yeah.
They want to give you the best shot of communicating who you are and sort of how you see the world.
Yeah, I think from all the faculty and teachers that we've spoken with at Cambridge in the last year, there is really a sense that they want everyone who's excited about architecture to apply to the course.
Yeah, I think if you've got an answer to the question we started this video with, why do you want to do architecture, then I think they want to hear from you, and this is true of all degrees, I think.
Yeah. So if that was our first question, then I think this is a helpful second. What am I most confident about, and what am I less sure about?
And you can use that question to help prioritise what's more important for you to do, and to know that in the end it's only one part of a much bigger picture.
Yeah, we had a question on Instagram the other day from someone called Afif, and he said, I'm currently working through your podcast and I'm looking to study architecture at Cambridge as the course really appeals to me. My dilemma is whether or not it's worth doing an EPQ about architecture for the purpose of my application. So for anyone not in the UK, an EPQ means Extended Project Qualification. You do it at the same time of A-level. It's like a long essay. My plan is to do research into how architecture interacts with current affairs anyway, through reading books and articles and listening to podcasts. Would you say this is enough for the application, or should I do an EPQ?
Yeah, and what we suggested for Afif is to think about that question, what am I confident in and what should I prioritise? You know, I did an EPQ and it was really interesting and definitely helped me write about architecture a lot better, but it does also take kind of a lot of time. I think if you want to do it because you think you'd really enjoy it, then do it because it's fun. But if you're kind of thinking, oh, I need something to kind of talk about in an interview, I can do this EPQ, then I think it's worth considering what's going to be the most important part of your sort of application.
Yeah, and for Afif, I said that, you know, he was already thinking about architecture in his daily life a lot. He didn't necessarily need the framework of a research project to do that. An EPQ is going to take a few hours a week from making the art and design work that will end up in your portfolio.
But if you think the practice of researching and writing about architecture would give you more confidence around talking and writing about the subject, and you're pretty confident already in your drawing and portfolio, then it might be a really good choice.
Yeah, and this is just one scenario, but I hope that it demonstrates that, you know, this application, it shouldn't take over your whole life, and you can prioritize things to make it easier.
Yeah, go outside, have fun, be a teenager, it's great.
Being an adult sucks.
Yeah.
So yeah, think about why you want to do architecture, and think about what you should prioritize to help you get there.
For me, I suppose I wish I'd started working on my portfolio maybe a little earlier, because it was just sort of too much work to do in too little time.
And for me, I think it was obviously my hand drawing, which, as we saw earlier, hasn't got a whole lot better.
Yeah, it might have got worse after all that CAD.
I've got so used to the automated world.
Yeah. So quickly at the end, we're just going to recommend some things to be engaging with and thinking about for architecture.
I want to say, read critics. Ollie Wainwright at The Guardian is great, and he's really accessible as a writer. He's got a great Instagram and Twitter too. I find the Financial Times architecture critique is also valuable. I don't always agree with the politics, and that's good. Read outside of your worldview.
Yeah, and I'd say check out some practice, the kind of doing of architecture and the wide variety of models for that.
Yeah.
I think follow some practices on Instagram. Assemble is a favourite of mine, but allow your kind of opinions on practices to change.
We used to have long conversations together about the brilliance of Björn Kringles, and I want to take all of that back now.
Yeah, look, I think he's done a great service in getting us excited about architecture with a sort of Netflix episode and stuff. But there's this funny thing where the more we've learnt, the more we've kind of disagreed with him.
Yeah, for sure. Someone who really disagrees with him would be the Instagram account Dank Lloyd Wright, who are worth a follow. The jokes are so niche and so weird, and also kind of pose interesting critique of the architecture industry. It's by no means an endorsement of everything they say.
Watch it.
But it's an interesting account to look through.
Yeah. There's so much to be said for the relationship between film and architecture too. Some films really actively use buildings to influence their kind of narratives and to frame scenes. We went to see the film First Cow a few months ago, and it was like a nice break from working.
Yeah.
And the set design on that was sort of food for the soul.
It's a classic Ewan line, food for the soul.
Yeah.
Also listen to our podcast. Look, whatever you're interested in the world, ask yourself how architecture relates to those things. Okay, that's all for this video. Please like it and share it with anyone who you think might find it useful.
And if you want to dig deeper into each part of the application process, you can find our original 6-part podcast series all about it on this channel or anywhere you listen to podcasts.
You can get subscribed for our next episode. We're hoping to feature some very different perspectives on this process from some of our friends at the architecture department in Cambridge, and hopefully you'll get a sense of some of the different ways that people get into the subject.
And if you're looking for something interesting to listen to about architecture, then we've got some podcast episodes that cover stories about how space and the built environment intersects with culture, politics, geography, economics. It's all good stuff.
In our last episode, I interviewed Leslie Kern, author of the book Feminist City, and we spoke about the role of architecture and public safety, and at a bigger scale about seeking a more just and inclusive design practice and culture.
Our website is talkingvolumes.co.uk. Email us at talkingvolumespod@gmail.com, and follow us on Instagram and Twitter at talkingvolumes.
And good luck with your applications.
Yeah.
Fade to black.
Like and sub.
Yeah, like and sub. Smash!
Favorite.
Favorite the video. Favorite the video.